today, which marks a climax in the series of agreements we have concluded and implemented, is a clear demonstration that where there exists goodwill and equal commitment to peaceful resolution between two parties to a dispute, a happy and equitable solution can always be found.
The discovery of vast oil reserves beneath the waters of the Bakassi Peninsula reshaped the once peaceful relationship between Nigeria and Cameroon. What began as a territorial disagreement in 1981 quickly escalated into military confrontations, culminating in a full-blown crisis by 1994. As Nigeria deployed thousands of troops, Cameroon turned to the International Court of Justice, seeking recognition of its sovereignty. After years of legal arguments and historical claims dating back to colonial treaties, the International Court of Justice ruled in Cameroon's favor in 2002, a verdict that reshaped borders and tested the limits of diplomacy in West Africa. This, a historical perspective of the Bakassi Peninsula. The Bakassi Peninsula is a narrow strip of land located in the Gulf of Guinea, on the western coast of Africa. It lies between the Cross River estuary in Nigeria and the Rio del Rey in Cameroon. The area has long been a subject of dispute between Nigeria and Cameroon. But to understand why, we must first look at the historical background of the region. The story of Bakassi's ownership can be traced back to the colonial era. During the late 19th century, European colonial powers, especially Britain and Germany, made agreements that affected how territories in Africa were divided. In 1884, Britain signed a treaty with the kings and chiefs of the Old Calabar Kingdom in what is now southeastern Nigeria. This treaty effectively brought the region, including Bakassi, under British protection. On the other hand, Germany had established a protectorate over the region that would become modern-day Cameroon. The two colonial powers began to define boundaries to separate their territories. This led to several agreements, including the 1913 Anglo-German Treaty, which attempted to establish clear boundaries between British-controlled Nigeria and German-controlled Cameroon. According to the 1913 treaty, the boundary between the two colonies was drawn in a way that placed Bakassi under German control, hence part of Cameroon. However, this treaty was never fully recognized or accepted by the local populations who lived there. After World War I, Germany lost its colonies, and the League of Nations mandated Cameroon to France and Britain. This led to further complications. The British administered parts of Cameroon, including areas adjacent to Bakassi as part of Nigeria, which created confusion about the true ownership of the region. When both Nigeria and Cameroon gained independence in the 1960s, the lack of a clearly accepted boundary created room for dispute. Both nations claimed Bakassi based on different interpretations of colonial-era documents. Nigeria believed it had rightful control based on historical occupation and the 1884 treaty with Calabar chiefs. Cameroon, however, pointed to the 1913 agreement and later administrative boundaries that included Bakassi as part of its territory. The people living in Bakassi are mostly of Nigerian origin, particularly from the Efik, Ibibio, and other ethnic groups found in Nigeria's Cross River state. These communities have long-standing cultural, economic, and social ties with Nigeria. For decades, they identified as Nigerians, used Nigerian currency, and relied on Nigerian government services. The conflict over Bakassi remained mostly diplomatic until the 1980s, when tensions escalated and military clashes started to occur. In 1981, a violent confrontation between Nigerian and Cameroonian troops marked the beginning of a more serious territorial dispute. Over the years, both countries accused each other of aggression, and several more clashes followed, making the region highly unstable. The historical perspective of the Bakassi Peninsula conflict lies in colonial-era treaties, administrative confusion after the fall of German colonies, and the failure to clearly demarcate boundaries after independence. These historical mistakes and oversights laid the foundation for a complex and emotional dispute between Nigeria and Cameroon. The people of Bakassi, caught between two nations, continued to bear the brunt of the disagreement, living with uncertainty and unrest. Indeed, conflict is a common part of human society. It happens when people or countries have interests that clash. In the case of Bakassi, the conflict came from two countries, Nigeria and Cameroon, both wanting control over the same land. Each country believed it had the right to own the Bakassi Peninsula, and this led to a long and serious dispute. The dispute between Nigeria and Cameroon officially turned violent in 1981. Cameroonian forces invaded the Bakassi Peninsula, claiming that Nigeria had illegally taken over their land. The Nigerian military responded, pushing back the Cameroonian troops. This back-and-forth fighting continued for years, resulting in many people being killed and others being forced to flee their homes. Villages were destroyed, and the people living there, mostly Nigerians, were left in fear and suffering. By the early 1990s, things got even worse. In 1993, Nigeria stationed about 3,000 soldiers in Bakassi to protect its interests and citizens. Skirmishes between Nigerian and Cameroonian troops led to more deaths. Both countries refused to back down. At this point, the international community became more involved, urging both sides to resolve the matter peacefully. On the 29th of March 1994, Cameroon took the case to the International Court of Justice, asking the court to decide who legally owned Bakassi. Nigeria accepted the court's authority and submitted its own arguments. Cameroon based its case on the 1913 Anglo-German Treaty, which, according to them, placed Bakassi under German control and later Cameroonian rule. Nigeria argued that it had always occupied Bakassi effectively and that most of the population there are identified as Nigerians. They also cited earlier agreements made with the local Calabar chiefs by the British in the 1880s. After 8 years of studying the case, the ICJ gave its verdict on 10th of October 2002. The court ruled in favor of Cameroon, stating that based on the colonial documents, Bakassi belonged to Cameroon. The court ordered Nigeria to transfer control of the peninsula to Cameroon. This decision shocked many Nigerians. There were protests and angry reactions across the country. Many people believed the ruling was unfair and ignored the wishes of the local population. The Nigerian government, however, decided to accept the ruling to avoid further conflict. The government emphasized that peace and the well-being of the Bakassi people were more important than holding on to the territory. To implement the ruling peacefully, both countries signed the Green Tree Agreement in June 2006 in the United States. This agreement, brokered by the United Nations, set out the steps for a smooth handover of the Bakassi Peninsula to Cameroon. Nigerian troops were gradually withdrawn, and the final batch left in 2008 after the signing of the Treaty of Calabar. However, not everyone was satisfied. Several local groups protested the handover and demanded independence for Bakassi. Some even declared the region the Democratic Republic of Bakassi in 2006. Violence and resistance followed, although it was not enough to stop the transition. One of the main reasons the Bakassi Peninsula became such a hotly contested area between Nigeria and Cameroon is its potential wealth in natural resources, especially hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons like crude oil and natural gas are valuable resources used globally for fuel, electricity, and many other industrial needs. The presence of these resources turned Bakassi from a quiet fishing area into a center of international attention. Before the 1970s, Bakassi was largely considered a remote area known for its rich fishing grounds and small settlements. However, things changed when geologists and exploration companies reported that the region might contain large deposits of oil and gas, especially offshore in the Gulf of Guinea. Both Nigeria and Cameroon saw the potential economic benefits that could come from controlling this resource-rich zone, as oil was already a major source of income for both countries. The possibility of new oil fields made Bakassi a highly valuable asset for Nigeria. Control of Bakassi was important not only because most of the inhabitants were Nigerian, but also because its oil industry was already well developed. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, nnpc, along with international oil companies, had a strong presence in the Niger Delta region, which bordered Bakassi. Owning Bakassi would give Nigeria access to even more oil blocks, increase its earnings, and strengthen its economic position in the region. Cameroon, on the other hand, had a smaller oil industry and was eager to expand it. By gaining control over Bakassi, Cameroon hoped to attract foreign oil companies, create jobs, and increase government revenue. The country also believed that control of offshore oil in Bakassi would reduce its dependence on imported fuels and give it more influence in regional affairs. Because of these potential rewards, both countries became increasingly unwilling to compromise. Oil transformed Bakassi from a quiet boundary dispute into a serious economic and political issue. Each side accused the other of trying to grab land for the sake of resources. The discovery of oil gave the conflict new urgency, making it more than just about history or people. It became about future profits and national development. Even during the legal battle at the International Court of Justice, the issue of oil was never far from the surface. Although the court mainly considered colonial-era treaties and legal arguments, it was clear to observers that both sides were motivated by the desire to control oil resources. After the ICJ ruled in favor of Cameroon in 2002, the Cameroonian government quickly moved to allow oil companies to explore and possibly drill in the Bakassi waters. Meanwhile, the Nigerian public feared that the loss of Bakassi meant a loss of oil wealth. Many felt betrayed by the international community and by their own government for giving up such a valuable territory. Several Nigerian groups argued that the ruling was influenced by international politics and the interests of Western oil companies, although there was no concrete proof to support those claims. The local people of Bakassi were also deeply affected. Most of them had lived in the area for generations and were primarily fishermen. With the increasing interest in oil, fishing areas were disrupted and local livelihoods came under threat. Moreover, many feared that the profits from oil exploration would not benefit them, whether under Nigerian or Cameroonian control, to ease tensions and protect the local population. The Green Tree Agreement included clauses to respect the rights of Bakassi's inhabitants and ensure their access to social services and security. However, reports in later years indicated that many residents continued to feel abandoned. The promise of shared benefits from oil wealth largely remained unfulfilled for them. At the end of the day, the hydrocarbon potential of the Bakassi Peninsula played a major role in shaping the dispute between Nigeria and Cameroon. The lure of oil and gas wealth intensified the conflict, influenced international diplomacy, and added pressure to both governments. While the legal judgment brought an official end to the dispute, the underlying issues, especially those related to natural resources, remain sensitive. If you enjoyed watching this video, please show support, leave a like, share, and subscribe, and we'll do our best to ensure we're your new favorite history channel now.